This KH talk is going to be a risk, dude. Oh my god. You guys are just I think you're going to be a little surprised. I think that's the best way to describe it. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, of the court, Attorney Bloody Biscuits, I present to you my case. My case for the command deck is innocent. The command deck is an innocent man. It's time the truth comes out. It's time for us to examine this a little further. Time for Detective BB to get on the case. So, the thing about the command deck is that the Osaka team and the command deck have kind of been associated with each other, deservingly so, because Birth by Sleep was the first game that came out with said command deck. There's also been this negative association with the command deck. A lot of times, and honestly, I might have a lot to do with this, people will see the command deck and they'll just kind of associate it with just bad game design. It's just a bad thing, and we should just never, ever have the command deck in our video games ever again. But that's not true. That is not true. And by the end, I will provide evidence, factual cases, and hopefully you will see the truth in all of this. All right. So one of the common accusations when it comes to the command deck is that it is broken and unbalanced. One of the biggest accusations with the command deck is the dirty balloonra and balloon and thunder surges and mines and spamming fire and this, that, it's got all these busted commands. And you know what? That is actually very true. It does have a lot of busted commands. As Balloonra, Surges, Mines, Renewal Block, Magnega, etc. You guys in chat could probably rattle them off to me. There are so many commands that are just ridiculously good. And the reason that they are so good is the disjoint hitboxes, so you can just, chuck a projectile. It's not even just a projectile. They provided like enhanced versions of certain projectiles. So like triple Firaga, triple Blizzaga, fission Firaga, crazy good damage, stun, and iframes. Surges are probably the number one example. There are still other examples, probably like Aerial Slam. Lots and lots of iframes with specific commands that deal lots of damage, and they basically they're so much better than any other form of dealing damage because they're so safe, and it's so easy to just kind of use it in any situation to prevent yourself from taking damage or just like slide in through an attack that's coming in at you and then just like punish them for doing something. And of course, only took up one slot. So the majority of the really, really good commands in the game only take up one slot. You might not think that's a big deal, but when you realize that you can fill your deck with 8 commands, and there's no restriction whatsoever on any 8 commands you can choose, you can find 8 really good commands that only take up one slot, and you'll be basically unstoppable. The common strategy for like any super boss, 4 surges, 4 cures. So if you're getting hit with like a bunch of stuff and like you think that you can't heal yourself, it's just like second chance once more through that stuff, Leaf Bracer, and just use 4 cures and you'll be good to go. The thing about the fact that they only take up one slot is that by the time that you use all 8 commands, it's already been reloading for a good amount of time. And if you combine that with the next point, hastes, if you combine that with the fact that you can have up to 5 attack and magic hastes available, you basically have a rotating door of unstoppable commands that basically have no cost. And they just they reload themselves as you just infinitely use them over and over and over and over again. Combined with the individual cooldowns for commands, you have a revolving door of busted attacks. So you see all this stuff, all the evidence that I've brought to you, and you might think, well, doesn't this work against you? Wouldn't this make the command deck seem even worse? And that's the thing though, is that it's not the command deck that's doing this stuff. It's the attacks themselves and the associated abilities that your character can use that makes the command deck seem so busted. The command deck itself as a concept, as an idea, is literally just a simplification of the command menu. Instead of having to menu through to get your items, to get to attacks, to limits, to anything, it's literally a simplification of that where it just takes all of those things, turns them into commands, and has a little deck for you to very easily toggle through and choose your attack at your whim. It's meant to make things easier for the player. There's not a crazy amount of effort and thought, and you don't have to do a lot of mechanical memorization in order to get the most out of it. The command deck it's not its fault. It's literally just the fact that the games themselves, the commands themselves, the attacks themselves are so imbalanced, and the fact that the devs didn't think, oh shoot, if we actually add in all of these attacks and haste, or all of these attack hastes and magic hastes, the commands themselves are just so busted. They're just so much better than every other mechanic in the game, like whether it be D-links, whether it be just regular attacks, command styles. The commands themselves are just so ridiculously busted. The concept of just having attacks, items, whatever, inside of a little deck that's easy to use, the command deck itself is innocent. Another associated criticism with the command deck is the lack of synergy. And when we say lack of synergy, let's get a little more in depth with that. Lack of synergy meaning you cannot combo in and out of combos very well. This is a big one. When you use a command, that's it. There is no there's no attacking afterwards. There's no like dashing afterwards until the animation itself is completely finished. There's no synergy with the combos and the commands. There is no follow-up to using said command unless it has some sort of like very specific launch to it. I think the only thing that actually follows up on a combo is sliding dash and fire dash. Those are the only things that for some strange reason when you do like 1-2 sliding dash, you'll attack afterwards and it'll actually continue the combo afterwards. It'll actually do like the finisher. There's like maybe like a few commands that do that sort of thing, but the vast majority of commands don't have the ability to combo in and out of each other. You couldn't shotlock while using a command. That's another basic thing. It's just like you would think like you use like a fission Firaga or Firaga, and during the lag frames or animation frames of said Firaga, you could hold down the shotlock button and use a shotlock while you're canceling out your animation frames for Firaga in order to kind of like make better use of whatever command you're doing. So like maybe you want to like launch an enemy up with like a Firaga and then shotlock them while they're in midair. You can't really do that in BBS. You got to finish that Firaga, and then afterwards, if you want to use a shotlock, you can do it afterwards. But you cannot combine the two together. BBS's just natural system disallows you from combining combos and commands, combining shotlocks and commands. They're gated from each other. The game's system itself very purposefully gates off the usage of like two mechanics at the same time. It's like very like, nope, if you're using a command, you got to finish that command and then you can do something else afterwards. Let's see, you couldn't cancel command animations with anything. Yeah, no, you couldn't cancel it with a command style or anything like that. Like you had to finish your command and then your bar would be full and then you would use the command style afterward. You couldn't launch an enemy up in the air and then use a D-link on the lag frames in order to utilize that juggle. You had to finish the command, and then you could choose to use the D-link. Small things like just being able to utilize the cancel windows of commands to use the lag frames of certain commands in order to lead into other aspects of the combo system or the combat system itself just wasn't allowed. Dream Drop Distance allowed this in one case, Spirit Links, and was probably one of the only things that Dream Drop Distance did right. The way that it works is Riku could link together with one of his spirits, and it would be essentially the same thing as using a command style in Birth by Sleep. And what you could do is you could use a command, like you could use like a Balloonra or something like that, and then as the Balloonra is just kind of sitting there, you just use a dual Spirit Link or something, and you can just cancel the frames where you actually have to smack the balloon. The Balloonras will still pop. They'll still like pop and they'll still chase after the enemy. You could do the same thing with Zero Gravisa. Normally when you cast Zero Gravisa, you gotta sit there for like half a second and then you get out of the animation and you can combo the enemy. But if you cast the Zero Gravisa and then use the dual link, you don't have to worry about that half a second. You just immediately Zero Gravisa, dual link, cancel the lag frames, and you can immediately get into utilizing other commands, into comboing the enemies that are in the Zero Gravisa while it's active. For some strange reason, and I swear to God it's an accident, Dream Drop actually allowed this little mishmash, the melding together of commands and the Spirit Link in order to cancel the lag frames of certain commands and allow for a little bit more synergized play. So the issue here, it's not the command deck's fault that this is happening. this lack of synergy between the command deck and other mechanics, other aspects of the game in Birth by Sleep and Dream Drop Distance. It's the developers purposefully saying, we have to keep these things separated. We have to keep them in their, you got to stay in your own lane. Commands have to stay in their own lane. Command styles have to stay in their own lane. Everything's got to stay in their own lane, all right? We can't have synergy going on between the two. Whether they thought that that would be better for a mobile game, whether they wanted it to play more like an RPG, so they wanted it to be like turn-based sort of feel between using commands and the decision to use attacks, whatever philosophy they were thinking, that's what they decided to go with when it came to lack of synergy between commands and other stuff. Multiple years later, I think we can all sit down and agree, like, it probably would have been a lot better if they just allowed there to be a lot more synergy going on between commands and other things. But it's not the command deck's fault. It's just the developers themselves gating mechanics from being used in synergy with each other. Command deck didn't do this. BBS and Dream Drop in general represented this game philosophy. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, my final piece of evidence for the command deck being innocent is that there is a solution. In fact, there's a solution that's already out there in the world. It's already made. And chat basically has already said it like 50 times over, so we already know what it is. Ladies and gentlemen, I present you the best mobile game in the Kingdom Hearts series, Recoded. My boy is here, and we have got some cool stuff going on. What has Recoded done to make the command deck cool? Because Recoded actually has the command deck going on, but it wasn't made by the Osaka team. It was made by a different developer, the same developer that made 358 over 2 days. They picked up the command deck and they did their own little spin on it, and it's very, very interesting. So number one, memory capacity. You could only create a deck with a small amount of strong commands, or at least a certain amount of strong commands. If you'll turn your attention over to the first image where it says memory, 100%, each command in the game takes up a certain amount of memory. And once you reach the max capacity, that's it. You can't use any more of your command deck. So, for example, you could use 6 weak quote-unquote commands, or you could use 3, maybe 4, if you like min-maxed really hard, really strong commands. So there are really strong commands in the game like Judgment Triad, Chain Rave. Chat probably knows even, better commands going on, like triple Blizzaga, triple Firaga. But the more strong commands that you put into your deck, the more consumed memory. So you couldn't utilize all of the slots that were available. There was actually a restriction when it came to putting in all of these strong commands together. So you had to think to yourself, like, okay, well, like, I really want like all these strong commands, but then I won't have any cures available to me afterwards. So I might have to like sacrifice one of them in order to have some cures available to me. Or maybe I can sacrifice 1 or 2 of them in order to have some weaker commands that allow me to, do some other stuff. And then I'll have a little bit more flexibility than just having all of these strong commands. Or maybe I'll just go ham with 3 commands and see what happens. A little bit more of a thought process when it came to how you actually set up your deck with all these strong commands. Reload speed was heavily nerfed. You had to rely on other options to deal damage. At least in my experience, there weren't a shit ton of hastes in the game. I'm sure there was like a reload speed, or there were probably a few abilities in there that sped up the reload speed of commands, but it wasn't as absurd as it was in Birth by Sleep and in Dream Drop Distance. Reload speed was a thing. It was like a heavy thing. When you used a Judgment Triad, that thing is on cooldown for like a fat 30 seconds, and you gotta wait that shit out. Because of that, you couldn't just rely on your commands the whole game. You had to rely on other modes of dealing damage, or at least you had to rely on like defending yourself until you got access to those commands again. It helps make just using basic combos actually feel worth it. And speaking of combos, the vast majority of commands freely allowed you to combo in and out of them. This is a big one for me, and I think for a lot of players. A lot of just basic commands in the game, whether it's like sliding dash, whether it's the ground pound, whether it's the ground to air, the very basic commands in the game that just kind of like enhanced Sora's combo ability, they freely were implemented into the combo system. I think it would reset your combo, but if it's still, there was like a flow to it. You would do like 1-2 finisher into like this command like sliding dash, and then you would like do 1-2 finisher again, or you do 1-2 finisher, launcher, attack like 1-2, and then use like a buzzsaw attack in midair with a command, and then you just 1-2-3. You would continue to do these combos, and the commands very freely synergized with Sora's basic combos, and it felt like there was actually like a combo system going on. It felt like there was actually some depth to it, where you could do a little bit more advanced combos, far more advanced combos than you could ever do in a game like Birth by Sleep. Combos in general and Recoded were solid. So like in comparison to Birth by Sleep and Dream Drop Distance, combos in Birth by Sleep are not that great. Even when you're in a command style, they're not that great. They don't have very good tracking. They're pretty slow. There's not a lot of weight behind them. Whereas in Recoded, for the most part, the combos felt good. It felt responsive. They felt snappy. Combine that with the ability to freely use commands, and it feels like there's a little bit more of a synergistic whole going on here, where it doesn't feel like commands are just like so wholly, disgustingly better than using combos. And the clock system provides better utility than either command styles or spirit links. So like when it comes to command styles, for the most part in Birth by Sleep and Dream Drop Distance with the spirit links, they're flashy, they look cool, and I'm sure they do like pretty good damage once you get to certain command styles, but it's literally just like a flashy just add on to the combos that you do in those games. Whereas the clock system, have you guys used 0-1? Because there's this cool ability on it where you can just combo an enemy that's across the screen from you. You can combo enemies just across the screen from you when you use 0-1, and it's pretty freaking cool. Or it has like, cool defensive abilities, there's multiple different trees that you can utilize with the clock system in order to get to certain abilities that you can use, and it actually feels like there's a lot of utility going on there. This leads to my final point. I mean, we've been talking some good stuff about Recoded, but why didn't anybody notice this? Why don't people talk about Recoded all that much? Like, you see it every now and then. Like, you see small little, like, comments like, oh man, Recoded was, like, so cool, dude. It was awesome. I love the clock system. You'll see it, like, on message boards here and there where people will sing Recoded's praises. Well, the boring story is number one. But as far as gameplay is concerned, shitty-ass gimmick areas / bosses that took up half the goddamn game. Holy fucking shit, dude. What did they do? They had this amazing combat system, and they literally threw it in the trash for half the game. They didn't even realize what they had, because they decided to make guard armor into a 2D side-scroller. They decided to turn Trickmaster into this long 5-phase rail shooter. They turned the entirety of Olympus Coliseum into a turn-based Final Fantasy game, which I don't mind. It's not like I hate turn-based Final Fantasy. You know why I'm upset with it, though? It's because I wanted to play this other game. I wanted to play this other game called Recoded, where there was cool stuff going on with the commands and combos and the clock system. I wanted to play that game. I didn't want to play Final Fantasy. I could probably count on like one single hand the amount of bosses that I could actually use the command deck system. Even with all of this good stuff, I think the majority of people are going to remember, like, man, I spent all that time doing that rail shooter thing. I spent all that time doing that 2D section in Hollow Bastion or whatever. Maybe they wanted to mix things up. They wanted to use like certain gimmicks. Maybe they wanted it to be a little bit more similar to the VCast system, where there was just a bunch of wacky stuff in each specific chapter. But man, did they take a good thing and throw it in the garbage and then douse it with gasoline and throw a match on it? Because man, they had a good thing going and they were just like, F it. F it, who cares, whatever. But yeah, I think that's it. I think that's the presentation, folks. So that's my case, ladies and gentlemen. Attorney Bloody Biscuits here, presiding. The command deck is innocent. There's a game out there that utilized it to its fullest abilities, that utilized it in a way that makes sense. It's not a bad thing. It's not a terrible thing. It's just we've kind of been burned by a lot of other games that have just done it really, really poorly. It's very, very upsetting. But I figured that, it'd be an interesting topic to go over, because, I think deep down a lot of us realize that it's not like the command deck is a terrible idea. It's not a terrible thing. It's just, it's been utilized very, very poorly. A lot of design decisions just kind of make it out to be the boogeyman, but it's really not. Now, am I saying if there was a future Kingdom Hearts game that had the command deck in it, would I be okay with it? No, I would probably be shitting my pants. I would be very afraid. Because trust me, I know what it's like to play with a bad command deck system. However, I would know in the back of my head, I would know, like, there's a chance this is good. Maybe they'll fix it this time. Maybe they'll fix it this time. Please tell me you played Recoded and you understand what's good about it. It needs the right people working on it. And then you need to realize what's good about it and what makes it go. You know, maybe we'll get something good in the future. Who knows? Was that enough for you, chat room? All right. Was that weird champ enough for you, boys and girls? Because I was writing this thinking, like, man, people are going to be weirded out by this. Like, especially coming from me. The jury has reached a verdict. We find these statements pretty cringe. Pretty weird, champ. Not going to lie.